Let's welcome our first panel, Rising to the Challenge, featuring Michelle McMurray Heath, the President and Chief Executive Officer of Biotechnology Innovation Organization, Steve Bates, the Chief Executive Officer, Bioindustry Association, Arnaud Bernard, the Global Head, Platform for Shaping the Future of Health and Healthcare, World Economic Forum, and the session leader is Steve Young, Co-Chief Executive Officer, WuXi AppTec.
Good morning. Welcome to the first session of the WuXi Global Forum 2021. This year, our theme is Advanced Breakthroughs for Patients. And we are here. I have three distinguished panelists join me. The theme of our panel is Rising to the Challenge. 2020 is a unique year. I'm sure as we gone through the New Year holiday, there are a lot to reflect and a lot to look forward to. Let me throw my first question to our panelists. I will start with Michelle Murray Heath, President and CEO of Bio, and then follow the time zone. We'll have two other speakers joining her to address those questions. The first question: what challenges and opportunities did the pandemic pose on the healthcare and the life science industry? Michelle?
Well, it posed almost every challenge imaginable. This was a year that could not have been foreseen, but perhaps should have been. And the industry had to challenge almost absolutely every assumption that it had about how it worked, how it collaborated, how it responded, the speed at which it undertook research, and how it delivered new solutions to patients. And it's been remarkable to see how the industry really rose to the challenge. We are so incredibly proud of the biotechnology companies around the globe. We at Bio have been tracking all of their research and development programs in response to COVID. And in the 12 months of 2020, our companies launched 838 research and development programs aimed at trying to prevent or stop or tackle COVID. And it was really remarkable to see the collaboration and the galvanization of the industry to really combat this common foe.
Thank you, Michelle. This is indeed such a remarkable year, and we can all feel your passion. Let me turn to Arnaud. Arnaud, from your perspective, I'm sure you bring a different view.
Yes, and I agree with Michelle. I really applaud the effort from the industry and the outcome we have seen, including emergence of therapeutic treatments and vaccines at unprecedented speed. I think we'll discuss things that can be improved. I think there'll still be quite a bit of overlap between various research coalitions. I mean, we had Active, we had the role of BARDA, we had the Coalition for Accelerated Research in Europe, we had the Therapeutics Accelerator and the ACT-A, the Solidarity Trials. So I think being run by WHO, I think there is certainly an opportunity for exchanging more and more coordination. Then obviously the second point is that the industry had to face is maintaining access to treatment for COVID negative patients. As we well know, every 1 month of a delay in cancer diagnosis is actually affecting the prognosis rate by anywhere between 7 and 13%, which is quite dramatic. So finding ways to protect access. And back on the topic of access, I think one of the big concerns we have when it comes to the World Economic Forum is universal access and equity, which is quite an acute problem now in the context of access to vaccines. So I think also an opportunity for the industry to actually work more with organizations like COVAX or the ACT Accelerator and preserve some of those doses to benefit low and middle income nations.
Thank you, Arnaud. Yes, I think it is a vaccine is certainly at the front center of discussion That's our next question, so stay tuned. We will dive deeper into vaccine shortly. Now let's turn to London. We have Steve Bates, who are representing, he's the CEO of Bioindustry Association. As Arnold offered a view from World Economic Forum, I'm sure Steve will offer us a very UK unique view. Steve.
Steve, thank you so much. And who knew that when you gave me this nice glass piece, Advancing Breakthroughs for Patients last year, how apt it would be for 2020. I see two challenges and two opportunities. I think the challenge that was put to us by society was the need for an answer. And I think science is working towards that need for an answer. I think we have risen to that challenge. I think that opportunity, the first opportunity, has been to showcase our innovation and our entrepreneurialism as a community. And I see that in the Oxford vaccine, I see that in developments of mRNA encapsulation technology, and I see that in genomic technology too. I think we've also had the opportunity to showcase our instincts in practice. And I think as a community from the UK, we've shown that we are science-based, that we are collaborative, very keen to be collaborative, and we think for the world. As Arnold has said, access is a global issue. And the final challenge I think that we found is the challenge of doing anything at global scale. Really, that is the capacity constraints that we see even within our advanced industries. We're doing this at a global scale at the pace that is needed. That is a key challenge, doing things at a global scale.
I can't agree with you more. I think with the three of you, you certainly cover enormous both global perspective and the geographic region. So since the topic of vaccine continue to come up, let's dive into this. This clearly at the front center of our fight against COVID. So how did the collaboration play a role in accelerating the research and development of a COVID-19 vaccine and other treatment? Michelle?
Well, what was so exciting to see is our industry has always been about collaboration. You see our large pharmaceutical companies collaborating with our small biotechs that are often at the cutting edge and trying, the most innovative approaches in the most innovative way. So it's fantastic to see that kind of collaboration continued. What was new was a really intense collaboration among our federal partners, our NGOs, and our academic institutions in a way that we've never seen before. We started a COVID hub at Bio that allowed people to almost have a Craigslist type approach to being able to say, well, I need manufacturing capacity. I need, some cutting edge mRNA technology, and allowed companies big and small from countries around the globe to work together in a way that would have taken months, if not years, in previous years. So it was phenomenal to see how people really came together. They put aside their competitive instincts, their other priorities, and really tried to form new partnerships that were essential. We also saw some global partnerships and collaborations that were key. We've mentioned COVAX, we've mentioned the ACT Accelerator, we've mentioned BARDA, we've mentioned CEPI. All of these were incredibly instrumental to making extreme progress, particularly on the vaccine front. They knew that this was an area that they needed to dive in and have some international governmental approaches to partnerships that were really, really instrumental in helping us get to the destination a bit faster. But let's say we also learned a bit from the collaborations. We learned where we could do things a little bit better. And I think we did better in the innovation science and the discovery science part of collaboration. But when it came to clinical trials, when it came to figuring out how we were going to distribute the vaccine, I think we can still have some lessons learned from COVID. So we'll be a little bit better prepared the next time around.
Yeah, indeed. I'm sure whatever we learned on a global community, many of those will be, actually tremendously valuable for whatever pandemic that arise again. So Arnold, you mentioned about vaccines distribution, and we, as you see, the R&D part of the vaccine work. how do you see the collaboration spirit, demonstrated here?
And you know, we've been very proud, the World Economic Forum, because in a way we launched the Coalition for Epidemics Preparedness Innovation back to 2017 in Davos after 1 year of very, very hard work. And the same partners have been stepping up to the plate today, partners of the forum like Pfizer, Moderna, J&J, AstraZeneca, and many others. So I think that's for the good, right? I think working together, a very strong relation with regulators, talking with Paul Stoffels from J&J said, yeah, you know, normally it takes 2 weeks for me to get a response from the FDA. Now we were having 5 chats a day, right? So that's a very, very different ball game when it comes to involving the regulators. But then I was mentioning the good and the bad and the ugly. The bad is probably that you still have a global mechanism that is an advanced purchase commitment mechanism. It's a remarkable advancement in the name of COVAX, but it's considerably underfunded. And it gets down to the ugly. I mean, when I look into the magnitude of those bilateral deals with high-income nations being covered multiple times their populations, up to 8 or 9 times in some instances, or starting to actually run very aggressively the vaccination programs, I've got a hard time to even find 500 million doses for low-income countries. When I look into the manufacturing commitment that have been made by industry partners, but also what they pledged to high-income countries and what they did not pledge to COVAX at this point in time. So the market forces headwinds are not playing in favor of universal access and equity. With the caveat that there is an opportunity still for high-income countries to actually redeploy the excess supplies they have secured by way of bilateral agreements, and that's where I hope to see some degree of generosity in the next 3 months.
Well, I think when I start a question on R&D, I can clearly see there is yet another opportunity, which is for the scientists to think about more creative ways to reduce the cost and reduce the cycle time, increase the efficiency of the vaccine production and manufacturing, and potentially also making the distribution a little bit easier. I'm sure that will also facilitate access. Steve, you are also in a very unique position. What's your thoughts on the vaccine R&D?
Well, I think we have to pay tribute to the distribution of the genetic code for COVID-19 to enable the early collaboration, the early insight that preceded the discovery of the new vaccines, and a number of different platforms that are making a difference now. So that's an important piece of data sharing globally that has made a real difference to the pandemic and really enabled that to get going. So that was very, very welcome, I think, and very important from our perspective. I've been in a trade association that sat in that nexus between governments, academia, small companies, contract research organizations, and large pharmaceutical companies. And like Michelle, that has been unprecedented. To see that community come together and collaborate in the way that it has, I think, has been phenomenal. And then that gives us the challenges of success, which is distribution, how's this going to work? These are the correct challenges. I hope that we embedded in that early thinking from the UK thoughts, and we've been able to benefit from some of the international collaborations that Arnold has mentioned. We've been fully engaged with those and keen to work with them collaboratively. And if I can, just on clinical trials, one of the things that we've had the benefit from in my country is because we have an NHS that opened its medicine cabinet very carefully and had the participation of the community in those trials, we were able to make the early scientific data to show that dexamethasone made a real difference. And I then look at the collaboration that's been built on that globally through the WHO and the other sharing of data, which has enabled some of the meta-trials, or the meta-analysis of trials, to show the benefits of steroids, not at the cutting edge of vaccine development, but a really important contribution to changing the paradigm for COVID patients with severe disease that's been accessible within months in many places in the world at a price point that is achievable for many healthcare systems in the world. And I think that, alongside an Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine with its commitment through to global distribution is really where I've been proudest to see our collaboration. And final point from me, of course, this collaboration is underpinned by international norms and of intellectual property. If we don't have intellectual property for us as an industry to be able to collaborate, very difficult to do this at the pace and scale that we see. And that's sometimes something that critics of the industry don't always stress, but it's been underpinning and vital, the collaboration we've seen this year.
Yep. I think that's a great way to wrap up this topic. Indeed, what we have seen is both unprecedented, and as one of your fellow countrymen said, it brings in the finest moment in all of us and for the industry. So let's, having spent a little bit of time of looking at the past, let's taking into a more a forward-looking view. So my third question to the panel is, what impact do you anticipate that this pandemic will have on the future of innovation in our industry? Going back to you, Michelle.
Sure. Well, I think it will take us years to come, but it's clear even from this new year turning point that our expectations have completely shifted. I think when we look across the biomedical research enterprise and the unmet medical needs that we have in many different disease areas, we now know what science can deliver when we have a concerted and focused effort to get there. And that means that where there's a will, there's a way. And this is a new paradigm, because what we've assumed for many disease areas that have stumped us for years is that the science is the stumbling block. But now we know it's much more like things about collaboration, the ability to get assured market access and support for a stable market once you're there. It's about being able to contact those regulators and have regulatory flexibility that doesn't compromise on safety or efficacy, but is rapid in its response and adaptation. It's about collaborating on clinical trial networks so that you're not reinventing the wheel every time you set out to do a clinical trial. These are problems we can fix. It's not science that's insurmountable. And so now we need to have a completely different set of expectations as we go forward and try to solve other disease areas and questions.
So, the analogy I have is it's almost like for many of the companies who try working remotely, they all of a sudden see some benefit. They ask the questions, why couldn't we do this more? And Michelle, as you have indicated, if we can really bring multiple vaccines to the patients so quickly and with the same rigor, and both in terms of science and regulatory oversight, then should we be able to do this more often in the future? And I think that's clearly almost an unintended consequence, but potentially shine a new light into how we bring innovation to patients. Arnold?
Yes, I think absolutely right. I think what we've learned in the field of vaccines, I think certainly can be leveraged in other fields when it comes to collaboration. I'm thinking about the field of diagnostics, for instance, where actually only 20% of biosamples are being shared. And if you don't get access to the biosamples, it's going to slow down your diagnostics development quite a bit. I'm thinking also about what could we do for Alzheimer's that we have learned from vaccines at this point in time in terms of rearranging clinical trials or mining with artificial intelligence large databases of failed trials from the past in the repurposing of some drugs. I think there are lots of opportunities with data and AI, like Steve was mentioning before. So I think we'll see quite a bit of learnings being extracted from the development pathway of vaccines. I think it's a very, very good outcome.
Yep, I agree. Steve, AI, of course, machine learning, I'm sure you have more insight on this and other impact for the future.
Well, it will be interesting to see whether the discovery by DeepMind about protein structures that we've seen in the UK in the last year will actually be the breakthrough that will make a real difference in 10 years' time rather than the vaccines for COVID. But that's one for future generations. But there are some real fundamentals that are moving in our our sector in terms of the science that underpin this discovery. And as Arnold says, in Dementia Discovery, we've had the Dementia Discovery Fund with innovative players like the American Football Players Association working with traditional pharma players for some time. And some of those collaborations which we've seen in COVID have their grounding and basis in other disease area approaches, but I think that they can be transferred across. I think that we'll see some interesting. I anticipate that we'll see further development in mRNA vaccine. One of the things that excites me most is whether the opportunity is there to anticipate where COVID goes, how it mutates, and whether we can get ahead of it by thinking and building libraries which will enable us to rapidly then deploy against whichever mutations we might see either in this disease or in other diseases. So can we use that speed very fast? Second thing for me is genomic surveillance now is reducing in price. And if you look at the technologies deployed by Nanopore, obviously significant in China too, you can really get to a granular understanding of some of this, and the sharing of that data enables us to look at the COVID pandemic, will enable us to discover more about development of other diseases, which will underpin development. So I think both those things, mRNA vaccines at speed, getting ready for the next one, and genomics would be two areas of focus where I think we could see them alongside novel public-private partnerships and new international collaborations, which we've seen starting.
Yeah, I can certainly, I can clearly feel that another area, from a personal point of view, I can see a flourish of pre-publications of scientists who share many of the not only genomic sequence, but also the manuscript and as quickly as possible so that their peers and the fellow researchers from around the world can quickly learn about from the insight from those new research. Let's turn to another question, which is related to when we talk about the impact, but let's drill deeper in terms of what lessons we have learned in another word, things we wish we haven't done, I'll put it that way, lessons learned, and the best practice gained. Michelle already mentioned a few about regulatory approval, about other process of innovation. So what lessons learned and the practice should the industry keep for the post-COVID world? So we will keep that theme. Michelle?
Well, I think the biggest lesson we've learned is that what matters is the number of shots on goal. When we tracked our COVID research and development projects around the globe at over 800, we also at one point did a comparison. And, in all of the fields of oncology, there was somewhere in the neighborhood of 350 research and development programs globally in the pipeline today. So you compare, fighting one infectious disease, albeit an incredibly crippling one, to all of the various forms of cancer. And you can tell that we just don't have enough variety of our approaches. We don't have enough concerted effort to get that same level and rate of progress. And so it's going to take having a lot of variety of approaches and really making sure that we let all the potential flowers bloom, because that's how we get to a successful scientific outcome in the end. That's the biggest lesson learned for me. The other lesson that I think is critically important that we shouldn't lose sight of is the importance of having an inclusive approach to research and development. You need to have diverse players around the table in terms of setting out your research agenda, but you also need to be very inclusive in your clinical trials so that when you go out to diverse communities and talk about whether or not a biomedical solution is applicable for that community or useful, you have the data to back it up. It's like anything else. So for example, when we have conversations with the African American community about their receptivity to the COVID vaccine, we're able to point to the Moderna trial and the Pfizer trial and talk about the high levels of representation of people of color in both of those trials. And that's incredibly important. And we shouldn't lose sight of that going forward. We have to make sure that our trials are representative going forward in the future.
I couldn't agree with you more. More shots on goal and more inclusive. I think that's really it's almost like a wisdom of the crowd, and particularly it's a global crowd of the best minds who are connected by technology. Arnold.
Exactly.
Just to focus on vaccines for a minute, I think what we have learned is that there are new platforms for vaccine development that have been extremely helpful. mRNA is one of them. We also learned that there is insufficient manufacturing capacity, and we've seen, point number 3, that there is going to be a temptation for a number of countries to actually build their own manufacturing capacity. So what can you do of that cocktail that would be a positive for the world is the interesting question in my view. So if Korea, if Switzerland, if France, if Germany, in the UK are going to build new manufacturing capacity for vaccines, can they be connected in a network focused on novel technologies, novel platforms, and actually innovate vaccines against prototype pathogens in the 30 classes of vaccines, of viruses where we have no vaccine? Because think about 40 classes and we have vaccines in 10 of the 40. I think that would be a fun, if the investment is going to be made to build that capacity anyway, how do we use it in peacetime to accelerate the development of novel platforms and research and development against prototype pathogens? And that's really my hope that a discussion of that nature will emerge.
So it's a synergy. So how can different nations, almost have a natural synergy of their infrastructures for manufacturing?
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
Wonderful, Steve.
Yeah, I'll pick up on Arnold's point. And if you look at what's inspired me in terms of lessons learned, I learned the heritage of the Liverpool School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. Why does a city perhaps best known for football, many shots on goal from Liverpool, have a school of hygiene of tropical medicine? And it is, of course, because it was a port city when sailing ships were the key way of trading around the globe from the UK. But that means that there is a heritage and an understanding of global health and the risks to health moving around the world, which is ingrained in our scientific thinking and in our scientific institutions, which I think is absolutely a very modern approach, which is, as Arnold says, now we need to think about this in terms of having the most modern responses to this, which can be about linking international capacity, having capacity enough to be able to deploy at global scale. My first point I started at, we now know that we do need more scale if we're going to do anything at pace, and companies like WuXi are fundamental to the global capacity at scale for this type of this type of work. So I think that's one thing that I've learned. The second, I think, is that science has set the bar very high, and we should expect societal expectation of us to remain at that high level, and that may be a challenge for us because not all of we know how difficult some scientific challenges are. To Arnold's point about having some of this capacity deployed against other things, much of our experience came from work on Ebola, work that Wellcome or others had commissioned, where it might not be immediately the health issue in the UK, but we had people who were working on it, people who had were funded and supported because in the Jenner and other places, because we could see that this was part of a global network. I think that needs to continue. And keeping the confidence of the public, not just as in terms of the trials, which is absolutely important, as Michelle has said, but also all the way through the vaccination program. One of the things that's heartened me is having the confidence of the public, both in the vaccine and in the vaccination process. I've been very worried about this year, but I've been heartened at the end of this year, as the year has turned, to see many seniors in the UK leading the line for our community, talking and explaining to people the benefits of vaccination. And I think that's a very, very important lesson that's learned for us, keeping their confidence and thinking as researchers about scale and deliverability. If only we had things that were as easy to distribute as the polio program is from start with COVID. It's fantastic to have stuff that's done with immense cold chain, but it would be so much easier if you could put it on a sugar pill. And I think for us as an industry, we need to think about some of those challenges of formulation and deliverability as much as we do about the fundamental science. But these are all challenges that we can look at with confidence from the success of part last year.
Yeah, indeed, those are great reflections. As I think about all those lessons, both Arnold and Steve, in your comments, you mentioned about the future. So let me end our panel discussion with a real forward-looking view. Now, with the vaccines, neutralized antibodies, and other treatment that are rapidly advanced through the industry's pipeline at unprecedented speed and with high quality, we hope that all of those new treatment will be able to help the patients around and the government and the physicians around the world to contain and fight against COVID. So if have all this wisdoms gained, my final question is, how should the industry prepare now for the next public health crisis? And obviously, as we move into the new year, we want to end with a high note, but this preparation is key. So Michelle, could you share a few wisdom?
Yes, well, I'll return a little bit to my previous answers because I think our clinical trial infrastructure and our regulatory infrastructure globally need to be upgraded in a massive way so that we have the capacity for the thoroughput of science that is about to come. But in addition, we also need to think with an eye towards the future of our talent pipeline overall. We need to interest more young people in science, to let them see the power of it. They've had it demonstrated before their eyes in the midst of COVID, but we need to attract more of the best and brightest into our laboratories because it's so critically important, particularly from diverse communities. And I worry about this in especially given the state of education during the pandemic. Some countries have been able to continue education, but in many countries, including the US, our students have really been challenged. So how can we as an industry put an eye to that and figure out how we supplement what was a gap year, an unfortunate, unintended gap year for many students?
Yeah, I have two college-age daughters. I certainly feel the same way. And as their schools all move to, their education will move online. One important point I want to echo what Michelle said is indeed, we need more infectious disease research, more epidemiologists, and more people were able to quickly, linking all this data together. Arnold.
Yeah, this is a very, very interesting topic. It's the one that I like to discuss with my good friend Richard Chet at CEPI, and his typical answer is the one that is inspiring me, and it is, what would this take to get a vaccine in 100 days? It would take two things. I mean, first thing is to shave 2 months in the process from the surveillance standpoint, where actually the reporting mechanism today is very much through a country-based or voluntarily basis reporting of an accident to WHO and then WHO to the world, when a genomic surveillance network in the current age is totally conceivable. So then you shave 2 months. And then there is this manufacturing alliance of existing novel platform enabling manufacturing sites that would invest into creating vaccines against prototype pathogens in classes of virus that we don't know too well. And that's where you would shave another number of weeks. And then you may get to 100 days. That's the vaccine's moonshot. Very inspiring. I'm very inspired by this theory. Over to you.
Yes, yes, indeed. I think that is certainly a very, inspirational goal. Steve.
Yes, I mean, I think actually 2020 will inspire a generation in the way that the space race inspires a generation of people to look into physics. I think into our industry, biomedical innovation will come from a number of young people seeing the advances, understanding the challenge, and we have to make sure that the opportunity is open to them to find routes, traditional or perhaps non-traditional, into our industry, and to see that value can be delivered to society, and inspirational careers can happen in a number of adjacent different types of roles within biotech, and those roles can be at all levels. So I think that we have a responsibility to harness that enthusiasm that I see in desire to do that. So I think that's one thing. I think the other thing that we can do is we can see this as the first chapter in a history of public health crises, where if we look back, we can understand how in the past global epidemics have happened and impacted us, whether that be what in European terms we'd call the Black Death, the plague, whether it be the Spanish influenza, as we'd call it, from 1919, or whether it be 2020. What's happening is these things are moving much faster, but our response now is, on one level, absolutely more sophisticated, and on another level, very similar to that which it was in the past. Stay at home, don't contact people, please keep your distance. So we have this strange thing now where we have both very, very high-tech pharmaceutical intervention and very, very low-tech non-pharmaceutical intervention. And one of the things that I think I'm keen to discuss with a range of people is how do we enable the fastest moving things, as Arnold has described, the surveillance, potentially the production of future vaccines, to link into some of the other thinking that has to go with the non-pharmaceutical interventions that have disrupted us so severely, disrupted our societies, prevented us from enjoying the celebrations we all enjoy in the way that we would want to. And I hope by the time we are able to meet again, we're able to do that in a format which is supported by the most novel science and technology.
I think that's a great way to end our panel. This is a wonderful time. I thank you for all of you to join me in this most unique remote panel discussion. Across the 4 different time zones and the geographies. Now, in the year 2020, this I'm sure has been part of our life. I certainly hope in the future, if there is another JP Morgan, the live version, the traditional version, I will see each of you in person, and I'm sure by that time we'll have more to cherish, to reflect, and let's hope 2021 is a great year for us to advancing breakthroughs for patients. Thanks, Michelle. Thanks, Arnold. And thanks, Steve, for joining me.